Welcome back, everyone. We are now moving on to our second presentation from soil. We're moving into water, and we're delighted to have actually Laura Burke, who's the Director General of the Irish Environmental Protection Agency. She's been a director in the EPA since 2004, and she's the chair of the European Environment Agency Management Board. So welcome, Laura, and lots to learn here about our water quality. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much, and absolutely delighted to be here and delighted to have had the invitation to come and talk to you all. And I'm always conscious when I'm speaking to an agriculture or farming audience that it's very clear I'm not a farmer, of no farming background. What I would say in the context of the last presentation on soil quality, which I found fascinating, is I'm a Dub who moved down to Wexford 20 years ago. So I have a forest behind me and a dairy farm in front of me. So I know a little bit about the rural environment, and I suppose the big differences between the urban and rural environment I certainly discovered when I moved to the countryside. And in the context of soil, which again I just found so fascinating there, this idea of growing things yourself, to get that connection. It's something in my personal life with my family, we grow vegetables at home, but also the EPA has supported, for example, Grow It Yourself, which is an organisation that are very much into trying to promote growing food for not only from the environmental perspective, but also for the kind of the health and well-being perspective as well. So today I'm really going to be talking about water quality. So that'll be the focus. Equally, in the context of agriculture, I could talk about greenhouse gas emissions, I could talk about ammonia emissions, but really just to be clear that the focus for me today is on water quality. And just a little bit about the EPA, first of all, I'll get the clicker going. We are an independent public body, so where our powers and responsibilities are set out in national legislation. So I'm always clear, we don't get up in the morning and decide what we're to do. It's set out by government, by the Oireachtas, what our functions are. And we've around 450 staff located right across Ireland. We've a wide range of functions. They're covered broadly under the themes of regulation, knowledge, and working with others. So we're an environmental regulator, and for example, we regulate industry, and we actually regulate the intensive agriculture sector, pigs and poultry, as well as a number of meat processing industry, etc. We also monitor the quality of Ireland's environment. So that can be water quality, air quality, bathing water quality, etc. And we're and have been defined as a key source of trusted information on the environment. So the agency is all about the data, the science, the evidence. So when we pride ourselves on our independence, but also our scientific excellence. So when we come out with a water quality report or an air quality report, it's absolutely the definitive, it has been peer reviewed, etc., including, for example, colleagues at a European level. And finally, the other aspect, this bit of working with others, we're committed to collaborating and working with others. We're conscious that we are 450 people, but we need the whole population of Ireland working on and recognising the importance of the environment. And for us, Ireland's natural environment not only has an intrinsic value in its own right, but it's also key to healthy lives, and we were hearing again that with Matt around the kind of mental health side of things, but it's also national competitiveness and essential for successful business in Ireland as well. And what we saw really, I think, during the COVID times was people a lot more connected to their local environment. When you're restricted to only go kind of 2 kilometres or 5 kilometres, suddenly you're much more connected with, as I said, your local environment, your local neighbourhood as well. And I think that really, focused people's minds on local environment, but also this piece about getting out in nature for health and well-being, including mental health and well-being as well. So that's a bit about us. So today, as I said, going to talk about the water quality report. That was just published a couple of weeks ago. And it gives the overall ecological status from 2016 to 2021. It's a 6-year time period we run over. We look at changes and trends over that period of time and also progress towards meeting water quality objectives. And I should be really clear, it's not that we publish reports once every 6 years or once every 3 years. We publish reports on an annual basis, but this is just gives that particular time series, it gives these trends over time, which particularly with water quality, it can take a little bit of time for things to flow through, pardon the pun. As part of that, I want to look at the main pressures on water quality, the impacts from agriculture on water quality, and then nutrients and measures to reduce them. So that's going to be the main focus of my presentation. And when you look at what the role of the agency is, we measure and monitor around 4,000 surface water bodies and 500 groundwater bodies over a 6-year period. So that tends to be in 2-3-year cycles, but as you can see, multiple of thousands of water bodies monitored. And it's not only ourselves, but we also work with others in that monitoring. So, for example, Inland Fisheries Ireland, Marine Institute, Waterways Ireland, we would also work with as well. And really what we want to do as part of then of our reports is we kind of present on ecological status, chemical status for surface waters, nutrient concentrations and trends, and then the chemical and quantitative status for groundwater. So that's the purpose of the report. And my colleagues this year were kind of talking about making information relevant and visual, and they were really trying to find ways of making ecological status of waterways kind of understandable for people, and came up with this, I suppose, very clear visual. And for us, what we want is high and good status waters from an ecological perspective. So we want clean, healthy and diverse ecosystems functioning normally. And the aim also, of course, is to protect those. So we want no deterioration from those bodies. And then where you have altered ecosystems with impaired function, reduced diversity and resilience, the aim there is to improve them. So I suppose we really want to move up the chain, and that is the aim under the Water Framework Directive, and all of the ambition is to move, as I said, back up the chain. So when you look then to the ecological status in that time period for rivers, lakes, estuaries and coastal waters, unfortunately, what we're not seeing is a great picture. 54% of waters are in good or high ecological status. That means 46% are moderate, poor or bad status. So for a country like Ireland, who prides ourselves on our clean green image, having only 54% of surface waters in good status is not where we need to be or want to be. When you start looking at it then by category, because it depends on the water body, there's different situations. So our coastal waters are in relatively higher good status, followed then by the lakes. But when you move to rivers and estuaries, you're really seeing that the quality, the condition is really getting poorer and poorer. And then when we look at groundwater status, this is, I suppose, a better news or a story, and 92% of groundwater bodies are in good chemical status, and nearly all of them are in good quantitative status. And the groundwater bodies that are failing chemical status are usually associated with a small number of industrial or waste sites where there's historic contamination. And only 4 of the bodies that fail are failing for excess nitrate concentrations. So in the context of groundwater, it really is some historic issues there, and it is really around industrial contamination. And then when you look, because it's all, for us again, it's around trends and changes over time. So when you look at the changes since 2007, and why do we pick 2007? 2007 was the first cycle of the Water Framework Directive. When you start looking at the changes over the time, we're actually further away from meeting our objectives than ever. So, you know, with the first Water Framework Directive in 2007, and the objective at that stage was to have all water bodies in good or high status by 2015. Then it was moved out to 2021. Now it's at 2027 is the objective to have the water bodies in good or high status. And from our monitoring, what we're now saying is that we're not going to hit that. We are further away from that level of ambition. The trends are going in the wrong direction. And you can see that here from the bar chart. Now, what I would say is there are some improvements. So, for example, you can see that the number of high status bodies, the ones in blue, there's a reduction in What we're seeing is there's a reduction in the number of poor status bodies, and you can see them there from 33 down to 16. But with the high status bodies, we've gone down from 329 to 268, though some of the good status have gone up in number. So although you've got more good, you're losing the best of the best, I suppose is the easiest way to say it. So you've gone down for the very, very good quality ones have gone down, but you're also losing the worst of the worst. So you're kind of morphing into the middle. So yes, in some instances, I said, you know, you have less bad status and you've more good status. Overall, that trend is still in the wrong direction, as identified there by the arrow. And if you look at the changes since the last report we published, which was in 2019, the last of these kind of multi-year reports, what we're seeing is a very significant decline in the water quality in estuaries, at 16% decline. We're seeing a 10% decline in coastal waters. Lakes are declining by 3%. Rivers effectively at status quo, but I'll kind of come onto that in a moment. And groundwater, a marginal decline. So really what you're seeing is the estuaries and the coastal waters that are taking that significant hit. And then, of course, it's when you start looking at the improvements and declines in surface waters overall, there are improvements, and we're seeing improvements around 16% of improvements, but unfortunately there's also 16% of declines. So in many ways, we're running to stand still. So we've focused attention, and again, I'll come to it in a moment with regard to improving water quality, but at the same time, there's disimprovements there as well. And what we're seeing is this changes across all status. So we've got some high going to good, some poor going to moderate, but overall, we're not seeing a change. And big issues that we're seeing, the first is nitrate. And in many ways, I would always say that this, you know, it's a picture tells 1,000 words. And what you're seeing here is that issues can be regional. And nitrate is a particular issue in free draining soils in the south and southeast of the country. Concentrations are too high in rivers and groundwater, which is then flowing into the estuaries and causing damage. And as you may remember from a moment ago when I was saying the estuaries, we've seen a significant decline. So east and southeast of the country, we have a problem and it is getting worse. The nitrate levels there are too high, they're getting worse, and we're also seeing this is an issue where there has been a significant increase in dairy activity. And the two are connected. So there is a problem in the east and southeast of the country, and as I said, the trend is going in the wrong direction there. With regard to phosphates, a slightly different issue. It's mainly, as you know, on poorly draining soils along what we're seeing the Cavan-Monaghan border, so kind of the west, and then also east across from Limerick and the Suir catchment. So a different issue, again regional, but just seeing it, as said, in more up around the border area and then across the Suir catchment as well. And so what's causing the problems? You know, why are we in this situation? And the bar chart here is showing the main causes of pressures. And you will see that the brown chart is from the previous assessment we did, and the blue hatched is from the current assessments. And what we're seeing is 1,600 water bodies are impacted by pollution and at risk of not meeting their objectives. Agriculture is the most widespread pressure. Now, in many ways, you'd say that's not surprising, because I think around 66% of our land is used in some shape or form for agriculture. But agriculture is going in the wrong direction. There's 200 more water bodies are impacted by agriculture compared to the previous assessment. And where you look at other pressures, for example, urban wastewater, the pressure has reduced, but agriculture has increased. And what we're seeing is excess nitrogen and phosphorus losses to the water, and that's key. So it is around these nutrients in particular that are causing problems. So the key impacts, as I said, it's phosphorus, it's nitrogen. Again, you know this, it's causing eutrophication, this excess plant and algae growth that you're seeing in the pictures here. Phosphorus, particular problem in rivers and lakes, and nitrogen in estuaries and coastal waters. And we're seeing it all over. And as I said, these are pictures taken by our staff when they're out doing their monitoring work. We also do have an issue, I'm not going to focus on it today, with regard to chemicals such as pesticides. And we're seeing in some areas there's issues with chemicals. And again, some more of the photos. We're seeing too much, ultimately it's too much nutrients in the waters, and that's causing unhealthy ecosystems. And farming is the biggest, we're not saying it's the only source, but it is the biggest source of these excess nutrients in the Irish landscape. And it will be interesting to see what happens this year, because it's already been referred to, but we're hearing there's a significant reduction in fertiliser being used because of the war in Ukraine, because of the cost, so very much cost-driven reduction, and what impact that will have and whether that can be continued into future years as well. But cost really does seem to have driven a change in the use this year, but too early to say what the impact will be. And we know what has to be done. So back to rocket science, it's not rocket science. The map shows the areas where agriculture measures need to be targeted. The orange areas need nitrate measures, the blue areas need phosphate measures, and the hatched lines are the areas where we need both. The measures are different depending on the problem. So it's essential that it's the right measure in the right place, and this is something that we have reiterated right through since, I suppose, talking about the Water Framework Directive many years ago. Reducing nitrates in water is really around reducing the source, and reducing phosphorus is about preventing it getting into the water body in the first place. So it really is, as I said, we know what we need to do. It is around getting on with it and doing it. And there are co-benefits in all of this. There's co-benefits in the context of biodiversity, but also in the context of climate and ammonia as well. And I suppose one of the things, and kind of will be interested today as well, is hearing good news stories, because and look, it's part of our role. We tend to be highlighting where there are issues. But there are good news stories, and what we've seen in the context of the second cycle of the River Basin Management Plan for the Water Framework Directive is that there were 190 priority areas for action identified. These were targeted, the local authorities' water programme and the ASAP. They were working in these areas for the last 3 to 4 years, and the percentage of improvements in these areas is better than elsewhere. So what it's showing us is that where targeted actions happen, we can improve water quality. And this kind of ASAP approach, it's voluntary, it's confidential, but it would appear, and it's a little early to see or to say definitively, but it really would appear that when those actions happen, those targeted actions happen, the results are better. And we're also conscious that there is an EIP programme at the moment being developed under the CAP to fund further voluntary measures as well, all of which is positive. And then maybe, as I said, back to the good news stories, and just to conclude on these, is two things from our perspective. The first is around bathing water quality, and it's Lilliput in Lough Ennel, and any of you who may or have followed the EPA's bathing water reports, which we publish on an annual basis, Lilliput had poor bathing water quality for 3 years. It was at risk of losing its bathing water designation, which means that it would no longer be assigned a bathing water status at all. And Westmeath County Council and the local authorities' water programmes, they carried out investigations around the lake. And what they identified was that there was farming activities and runoff from farming activities, particularly when there was rainfall, and this is what was causing the problems with the contamination of the bathing water. So the ASAP programme engaged with the farming community, looked together at how best to address this, and it led to significant improvements in the water quality at Lough Ennel, and all samples in 2021 were of excellent quality. And what that says to us is when you identify the issue, when you take action, you can get the results that are needed. With regard to the EIPs, and I suppose we're following these closely to see what happens, it's great to see projects being funded, projects being supported, whether it be in water quality or biodiversity, and really trying to drive action in that way. And one of the things we've called for, whether it be through Food Vision, whether it be through the CAP, is all around results-based payments, and really supporting farmers in the farming community to do the right thing and be paid for results. And that, you know, we've seen it before in a pilot level with the likes of the Burren project, but that really is something that we would see there's an opportunity for scaling up. So I was asked just to briefly mention the Nitrates Action Programme, and the Minister talked about it. The 5th Nitrates Action Programme was published earlier this year, as you know. Additional measures are required to reduce the impact of agriculture on water quality. There was a need expressed by the Commission for improved compliance, and this is again something the EPA has called out with regard to the level of inspections and follow through not being at the level that should be, or the level that's required. And so out of this, the EPA has been assigned, and we will be coordinating local authority inspection programme for the next cycle. There will be an increased focus on compliance, and there will be an increased focus on follow-up. We're not the boots on the ground, but we will have the oversight role over the local authorities on this. In addition to that, in the context of the 4-year derogation that was approved by the Commission, the agency has been assigned the role of completing an interim water quality assessment in 2023. The criteria have been set by the Commission. It's all about nutrients, it's all about eutrophication, and reductions in organic loadings may be required in areas that aren't meeting criteria. So what you're really seeing here is a tightening of the screws by the Commission with regard to nitrates. And so there will be, as I said, increased focus on enforcement, and there will be this interim assessment. So just with regard to the kind of, I suppose, conclusions, only 54% of surface water bodies are in a satisfactory condition. Water quality has declined across all categories in the monitored water bodies. Improvements are happening, but they're offset by declines. And Ireland will not achieve our target of all water bodies being in good status by 2027. And I should say our latest target of 2027. And agriculture is the most prevalent pressure on water quality, with the trend going in the wrong direction. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Laura? If you'd like to take a seat there, we're going to just throw it open. Do we have any questions in the room, first of all, for Laura? There's a gentleman down there on the right. Oh, we've lots. Okay. So we'll start with you. Yeah. There's a mic coming over to you now. Brilliant.
I believe we as farmers could solve a lot of that problems, but bureaucracy stands in our way. I notice that if farmers had a lagoon and let their yard run off into that, you know, the open yard, that's the problem, because there's going to be accidental spills no matter how you do it. And the lagoon is never mentioned in this new acre scheme or any other scheme we had, and I don't think there's a TAMS grants for creating a lagoon beside the farmyard. So I think it solves several problems by that alone. So I'd like to hear the reaction, because one of the greatest fears farmers have is would say, if some official came in and say this is wrong, that's wrong, and you could end up in court, be fined, and you know what it is? You're punishing the wrong guy. You should use carrot before stick. That's I'd like to maybe get more reaction on that one.
Sean, what do you think? Because you probably understand, what is he talking about in terms of a lagoon? Is he talking about sort of a reed bed system or some kind of other? What's the choice there if you have runoff from a yard? You can't allow it into public waterways anymore, can you?
No, I think what he's talking about is an overflow on this tank from
Okay.
to hold anything excess. I think that's what we're talking about here.
And are they outlawed now, or what's the position with those?
Well, I think the biggest problem is they just became a vessel for more storage, and more storage was left, and I've seen that. I worked in fisheries in the past, and in places like Limerick, they were abandoned because they ended up becoming a store for just more slurries or more watery slurry or whatever, and added rainwater to that. And unless they're in a management system that's going to work, I don't think they did work, you know.
So, Laura, how would you respond to that farmer, Sean?
Well, I think the key there is the farmers need to be part of the solution. And that is one of the things that we were calling for in the context of the agricultural supports, the ASAP programme, is confidential, it's voluntary, and it is about working with the farmers with regard to what are the solutions. The role of the EPA is to give good data and good science and highlighting the areas of where there's particular problems. So we have what are called pollutant impact potential maps there, but basically we've got a lot more data, a lot more information now, that it's a lot more targeted, and say these are actually the areas where there's problems, which then supports the local authorities programme to go in and talk to farmers in those areas and see what can be done. With regard to carrot and stick, and I'd say this for each sector, so it's not just for the agriculture sector, in coming up with solutions, there needs to be support and guidance for people. People need to know what's the right thing to do and how you go about it. There needs to be incentives and supports, including financial incentives, because people need to be supported to do the right thing. And there also needs to be enforcement for the people who won't do the right thing no matter what. So it isn't one thing or another. It has to be a combination of all. And that's what we're even seeing in the context of the compliance around the nitrates. And the EPA, believe me, we didn't ask for the role, we were brought into the role of that oversight, because what it's seen is there weren't enough inspections. There wasn't followed through. We want the carrot, we want the derogation, but we don't want to be doing the enforcement and the heavier side of it. And that was absolutely driven by the European Commission, because they're saying if you have a derogation, you need to be able to demonstrate that you're actively managing it. So it is and that's why I come back to it's a combination of, you know, all of those factors. It's not one or the other, but very much so. You know, it has to be the farmers being part, and the agriculture, because not only farmers, all of the agriculture sector being part of the solution. Ye are closer to it. You know it. You know what's happening on the ground far more than certainly the agency will. We're all about what the impact is. That's our role. We're kind of saying this is what the impact is on water quality. This is the impact on ammonia. This is the impact on greenhouse gases. But the solutions need to be coming from bottom up.
Okay.
Before we do move on, I just wanted to make a point there. Is what that man was talking about there is, am I right in thinking though that the problem isn't in tank level or lagoon level, it's diffuse pollution is the issue. It's the
sorry,
biggest issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so it's what comes off the field in the middle of the night with heavy rain is probably the bigger issue.
That is, and that's like, you know, what we've seen over the years is, and this again, not only agriculture, but in the broader sense, is we've moved from a situation really around point source pollution. So the same with, you know, and moving away from that to a large extent has been addressed. We're now in that situation of diffuse pollution. And that's where it comes back to the application of fertiliser, etc., and fertiliser runoff, for example, being such an issue.
There was this table down here, this gentleman, just the black sweater,
Thank you. Do you monitor soil quality or soil function within catchment areas? Or
No is the answer, but I know Teagasc are very much involved in monitoring soil quality. We did research and we funded research around soil quality. In fact, funded Teagasc in particular to do a lot of work in that space with regard to soil quality around the country, but on a routine basis, it's not our role.
And has that been correlated with water quality in the catchment areas?
No, I would need, I'm kind of looking a little bit into the middle distance because I'm trying to remember there was a very, very large research project that we funded, because one of our roles then is funding research, and I think it did look to an extent with water quality and the soil quality, but it said it was more as a large research project rather than an ongoing monitoring.
Surely that's where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck, in the sense that if soil quality is monitored, that's going to be closer to the root cause of the problem of the water. If soil is functioning, if it's not captive, it's not compacted, then you're going to get the soil cleaning that water before it gets into water courses.
But aren't you back to the farming practices of the individual farm in that case? You know what I mean? The EPA wouldn't have a remit over the tillage practices of that farmer or whatever.
Yeah, but I guess they need to be connected for a solution to happen.
And I think it's back to, we measure the impact. So it's actually what's happened to water quality, but when you're going kind of upstream in the context of what you're talking about there, about what are the solutions, absolutely soil quality. It's back to you know, Teagasc and others looking at soil quality and how to improve soil quality and engage in it, you know, whether it's on a farm level or broader. I know they're looking very much around soil quality now, but it's not our remit, I suppose, is the bit I need to emphasise.
Yeah. Okay, gentleman just behind you. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Everyone in this room knows the value of trees and woody plants in absorbing nutrients that get down through the soil profile. And we know that the value that strategic planting of trees could make on farms in terms of reducing water quality. And I'm trying to think, where could we get a connect between your results and what you're finding to drive policy forward to support that strategic planting of trees and buffers in the right place, getting the sort of flexibility into policy that would allow that, and using your findings, the EPA's findings, as evidence to help drive that policy?
Well, one of the things is our evidence goes directly and links in directly with Department of Agriculture, and we engage with the colleagues in Department of Agriculture, I'd say, if not on a kind of daily basis, probably on a weekly basis. So we work with them on that. In the context of trees and context of forestry, again, it's something the EPA will be very conscious of from a climate perspective as well as from water quality. We've had some issues in the past with regard to where trees were planted in the wrong place and actually impacted on water quality. But I think we need to be looking forward and saying, well, what can be done that has back to co-benefits, multiple benefits, and having planting that can support, as I said, carbon sequestration as well as water quality. Our evidence goes in to the Department of Agriculture. You're not the first person to talk about the bureaucracy and issues. I know a new forest strategy was just released last week. I know at the Commission level they're looking at forest strategy as well. And one thing I would say is Ireland is quite different to, when I talk to colleagues across Europe, Ireland is very different to most countries. They're trying to prevent deforestation, and they're also trying to protect special areas of conservation that are forests. Whereas Ireland, we're trying to increase afforestation, which, and at the same time protect, for example, special areas of conservation. We're in a completely different space than other countries, and I think we need to be highlighting that, because there is a risk, and sometimes when you get, particularly coming down from an EU level, a perception that a kind of a one-size-fits-all, and the differences in Ireland in that trying to increase rather than protect or stay at a prevent decreasing is a very different way to look at things. And it does, like, there is, you know, I'm a regulator, so part of it is there is a bureaucracy. We have to assess applications that come before us for particular activities. And sometimes people say, oh, well, you know, surely this is a good thing to do. Things can have an environmental impact, and they do need to be assessed to make sure that, you know, it's the right thing is happening and it's going to be managed properly. But I think there is a challenge around forestry in Ireland, and like trees in general, and how much we can grow in kind of agroforestry, for example, and it's something that we've highlighted as being something positive before as well. So I can't give you the solution. I know I was going to say Jack Nolan's speaking later from the department, maybe he can, but what I can say is that all of our water quality reporting and evidence does feed in directly to the department, and I suppose I do kind of feel your pain, because we're looking at afforestation rates of 2,500 hectares, commitments up to 8,000 hectares. And I said, we're looking at it primarily from a climate perspective, but of course there's other perspectives as well.
Okay, go ahead there.
Was it the EPA's decision to split the journalist division of the farmer and then the wastewater treatment plants? We got the, that's one question. And from 2007 and to now, how much more sensitive have the testings changed? Because I'm an organic farmer, but I feel within the agricultural community that we were, you know, so maligned about the water quality, and then 2 days later, the wastewater treatment plants, you know, they're putting, in some cases, pumping raw sewage into streams, and I kind of know which I'd prefer between you know, cow shit and human shit going into the water system, and thank you.
Well, I suppose from our perspective we want neither. It's not one or the other. And that's why I wanted to show the graph as well with regard to wastewater treatment plants, and our role is to license municipal wastewater treatment plants, and what we have seen is a decrease in the impact over the last number of years. And a lot of that is because of investment. It is money going in to invest in new upgraded wastewater treatment plants. So it's not, you know, one good, one bad. The overall water quality report is highlighting that we've got an issue. Agriculture is one part of it. Urban wastewater treatment plants and other things are there as well, but agriculture is the biggest source of impact. And of the water bodies that are impacted, 63% of them are impacted by agriculture. So that is showing that agriculture is having a disproportionate negative impact and needs to be addressed. And I am in no way excusing wastewater treatment plants, because equally we come out strongly and say wastewater treatment, yes, there have been improvements, but not enough, not fast enough, and more needs to be done. So if I was sitting in front of the water industry here, that would be, of course, what I would be focusing on. I didn't quite understand your question about separating the wastewater treatment plants from the farmers. It's
whether it was the EPA who put out the journalism on the agricultural industry. They should have come out the same day, so that it was a broad church instead of pitching to the farmers, pitching then to wastewater treatment plants. They came out on 2 days, so every phone was ringing in saying, you know, the dairy farm down the road.
okay. Well, I suppose it.
Okay.
I'll have.
Whether that was EPA policy or whether that was journalistic license.
Oh, it wasn't journalistic licence, and I suppose I'll have to agree to maybe disagree with you. There are two different reports covering different things. One is the overall water quality, which is a report we publish overall looking at everything in the context of water quality, and the other is a specific annual report we produce on wastewater treatment plants. So, they're just different purposes.
The sensitivity of your testing?
The sensitivity of our testing does improve over time, but not to the level that it's going to have, and we do big differences. And we're actually now, and we can get into it here, where there's requirement for new testing, particularly I'm talking about chemicals, some chemicals which are ubiquitous in the environment and other newer chemicals that are seen. I didn't get into that here, but that's separate, that's additional testing required, but not to the extent. The reason for the change is not because our testing is more sensitive. That's, I suppose, the answer.
Two questions there coming in online from Paul R. For Laura. If you had one wish, what steps would you take from an agricultural perspective to reduce water pollution? Do you think slatted houses are a suitable solution to the issues raised in your talk? The first question. Buffer zones, increase them in particular dairy.
Let's see.
As fertiliser use is going down anyway, and we might see benefits of that, but increasing the distance between fertiliser, use on fields and nearby waterways and streams, has that been researched in terms of the impact that would have if you're lowering the amount spread at the same time?
I think there's two things I'd say there. First of all, fertiliser use is going down this year in particular context of the Ukraine war and the price. What we need really is it can't just be an up and down depending on price. We need to be targeted, saying actually changing the types of fertiliser being used, which has been driven through the agriculture plans. Like a part of us kind of go, it's really good to see. But when I talk to other agricultural colleagues, they'll say, this is a once-off, it's not sustainable, there is an impact being seen, which I don't necessarily agree with, because then we're saying, well, if the fertiliser is going straight into the river, it's not been taken up anyway. So there's kind of different views. But if you ask me one thing with regard to because rather than getting into specific kind of actions, is that there is a farm management plan at farm level, because each farm is different, each of the issues are different, they're in different soil types, different challenges, that there is a farm management plan that takes on board your environmental, as well as the economic issues you have to consider, but you're taking on all of those environmental issues and you manage it as part of the business. So it's not something separate over here. We've got the business, and then separately we have to look at the environmental aspects. There is one overall farm management plan. And again, the agency, the EPA, would have called for that previously. We call for it on an ongoing basis by saying, look, it's site specific, it's farm specific, have a plan that addresses and get whatever supports in are needed. But it comes back to my three things: supports and guidance, incentives,
yes, incentivise change.
And then there will have to be compliance and enforcement for those who will not perform appropriately.
Slatted sheds, that question, that's more back to specifics, I suppose, Sean, is it like?
Yeah, I suppose, if you're in the west of Ireland and you have storage for 4 months and your winter runs 5 months, you're already in a danger problem, so it doesn't necessarily. And do we go bigger or better? Personally, I think we want to be moving away from slatted houses. I think from an animal health perspective, I think they have issues, but also I think from a soil health perspective, we're far better off with something like a dry bedded system or something like that.
Many people went into them a few years ago, didn't they? And then they didn't continue, but we can talk about that again. We'll take one more question. I'll give this gentleman over here. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Just a couple. Just very quickly. First of all, aquaculture or mariculture, does that not have a significant adverse effect on estuary water? And if so, what measures are being taken to correct that? And secondly, is it true that Sitka spruce plantations affect water quality? And if so, should we not revisit our entire afforestation plan? Thank you.
well, you may know some of this is just not our remit. The aquaculture is not the remit of the agency. What I would say, because one of the questions that we're often asked is, well, how do you know, for example, the pollution is coming from agriculture and not from other sources? And we have, again, it gets into the science, source apportionment models that look at our own data, but also 140 other data sets in particular regions, and then we ground truth the information that we have. So we're certainly satisfied that when we come out with the water quality report and we're saying this is coming from, from the nitrates is coming from a particular area, that we're satisfied it is. With regard to aquaculture, I won't speak to it because with regard to how aquaculture is managed, it's not our remit, and I'm not going to speak in things I don't have an expertise in. And with regard to Sitka spruce, what I would say is it's back to the right tree in the right place, which is another thing that we would have said, which is it's not just that, afforestation good or afforestation bad, it needs to be looked at in the round. And the types of trees, and I know certainly in the new forest plans, looking at much more of mixed type of trees and not the Sitka spruce that we may have seen a number of years ago.
Okay, we're going to bring that to a close because one very quick question here, if you can just shout it up quickly.
Yeah, just a lot of talk about carbon sequestration in soils, and I just feel, the way we speak about soil and soil health. Hello. Yeah, the way we're speaking about soil and making decisions in agriculture, and we're going to have a focus now on climate action and water quality and stuff. And I think we're starting to think about soils in terms of carbon sequestration, and we know Teagasc is doing a lot of work there. Are we missing something? Maybe we should be talking more about soil health in terms of all that can bring. Are we missing out on soil health because we haven't done the work on it? And maybe our focus on carbon sequestration is going to end up missing something. What do you think about that?
I think, well, and I again would preface this by saying not an expertise in soil health, but there is a risk that we look at, and this again, something the EPA would have said in our most recent State of the Environment report, there is a tendency, I would say in Ireland, but not only in Ireland, we look at air quality in isolation to water quality, in isolation to biodiversity, in isolation to climate change, and then there's risks of unintended consequences. You do one thing in one area that's going to have an impact somewhere else. And we don't look at it in the round. And one of the things we've said is that there should be a national policy position on the environment that takes all of kind of the individual plans and actions and pulls them together. And there is a risk if we look at soil just from a sequestration perspective, then you're not looking at it from a health perspective. But there's also opportunity for win-wins if you look at soil health and carbon sequestration. So I think to answer your question, I think there is a risk, and we just need to think about these things carefully, and whatever plans and programs around sequestration, that it is looked at. It's better to do these things properly than just have a knee-jerk reaction and think, this is the latest thing to do.
Okay, listen, we're going to bring Laura's session to a close, so thank you so much for that. Please give her a round of applause. Thanks for coming.